On today's episode,
elite hunting parties where they're hunting humans. Now you add that with the thousands upon thousands of homeless people missing.
Another
like,
conspiracy theory.
right.
Well,
When it's
let's
all,
not
right.
go so fast.
It's
Yeah.
it's a real thing.
It is. They even have a website. They have a website.
We belong to Trilateral Commission.
And Bilderberg. They list all the people that attend.
Not many people know this, but in the 1990s, there was a conspiracy theorist with a public access show where he ranted about crazy crackpot theories every single day, and nobody took him seriously. But then after he died, it turned out he was right about everything.
what if I told you? The moment he finally spoke the truth, they didn't celebrate him. They declared him insane.
They're out in the open now. They're not even trying to conceal it anymore. These people went to the same universities and fraternities. They're on the same boards of directors. They have like interests. They don't need to call a meeting. They know what's good for them. You don't need a formal conspiracy when interests
Recently, Mike Tyson came out and talked about this, I believe, on the Joe Rogan show, talking about elite hunting parties where they're hunting humans. Now you add that with the thousands upon thousands of homeless people missing, to where they've actually interviewed homeless people that are in fear of their life. You can go look this up on YouTube. They're around, saying that white vans are coming and picking up homeless people in the middle of the night and snatching them. No one knows where they're going. Also, this, I guess you could call pandemic, epidemic, whatever you want to call it, has been happening in Ciudad Juarez, where thousands of women have been murdered since 1995. Mass burial graves everywhere. And I've heard about this since I was a kid, that very rich Mexicans in Mexico would have these parties where they hunt people and you know, people that they feel are worthless, that have no future anyway, would take them, kidnap them, and send them off to a ranch somewhere, and they were hunted. So, John Pounders, thank you so much for joining me on this one.
Yeah, I appreciate it, man. And we're also going to talk about Sarajevo in the 90s, because a new case just opened up in 2025 where snipers, there had sniper tourism going on in Sarajevo. They had this town surrounded, man. And we'll talk about that. It's crazy, but they're just now going through documents. A few people have been named, not publicly, but they're getting dossiers on everybody. It's crazy, dude. So yeah, this goes down and it goes on. And that Mike Tyson clip you sent me, everything they said there, so true.
There's some group that is very well known to homeless people in certain areas, I think of like Southern California. And there's interviews, I wish I could remember the name, but they're like, yeah, if you see white vans, like don't, it's this group, and I can't remember, 808 or it's not 808, but something like this, right? And that group is very well known amongst the homeless community for, it's often young women, and they are essayed for sometimes days on end in very brutal fashion, and then often are never seen again. So who knows what happens to them. So definitely versions of this are happening in that way.
Another conspiracy theory.
Right.
Well,
When it's
let's not go so fast.
It's a real thing.
It is. They even have a website. They have a website.
We belong to Trilateral Commission.
And Bilderberg. They list all the people that attend. But by name, all these people. And you'll recognize 80% of them.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
It's
I guess
nuts.
that's hiding in plain sight.
Mhm.
But it's something where I guess what I should say is the connotation of it was where the conspiracy theorists would be saying something and people would be like, no, it's just this group. It's David Rockefeller, like,
I know, right?
Harry Under Rothschild, and listen, we put Clinton on it. He was bored after he left office, and then you get Epstein in this sit down with Steve Bannon. We will talk about him. But you get Epstein saying, yeah, I was on the Trilateral Commission, and here's how I got on. And he makes it sound so simple.
Yeah, right.
I'm like, how do you even get there, buddy? You're a kid from Coney Island.
Somebody taps you on the shoulder. Next thing you know, you're getting an email.
Nothing that they said in this podcast in the beginning there about the Bilderberg Group and the Trilateral Commission, none of those things are secrets. It's not conspiracy. It's out in front of your face, guys. That's the thing, right? Like, we talk about keeping things grounded in reality here. The real conspiracies aren't even conspiracies, right? Like, it's right in your face. It's out in the open. It's in the public. They're not even hiding it anymore. And, you know, I said something, I think we were talking about the Charlie Kirk case a couple episodes ago, and, about some issue, like, why would they use the wrong caliber weapon? Why would they plant a 30-06 if they were using 223? That's a pretty legitimate argument, but I think the answer is they think you're that stupid, because look at what they do right in front of your face with the Federal Reserve, Trilateral Commission, the Bilderberg Group, the WEF. Like, all these organizations are not secret. They're open. They're publicized. The meetings are recorded and broadcast on the internet. They know you're not going to watch it. They know you're not going to watch it. They know you're not paying attention. They know you're not well educated enough to understand half of what they're talking about. I mean, that's the facts, folks. You don't want to hear it, but that's the real conspiracy, is that it's right out in the open. They're stealing your children's future right out from under you, and they're doing it publicly, and it's not a secret. And you're not paying attention because you're too busy watching the most recent episode of Game of Thrones, or, you know, thinking about how, the kids in the tunnels are getting eaten for Moloch or whatever. Like, the real conspiracy is the Trilateral Commission, the Bilderberg Group, the stuff that goes on there. Pay attention to that and educate yourself around those topics and subjects that those groups are talking about, because they're planning how your future's going to look. You're probably not going to like it.
Okay, how about moon landing? Moon landing. This is a serious one. For some people, it's very important. Both of you say yes. Mm-hmm. Okay, did you watch the movie? It
was excellent. That was
Fly Me to the Moon?
Yeah.
What'd you think about it?
I thought the movie was done well. It wouldn't surprise me if we did film a backup video, but I do think kind of American exceptionalism, I think we got there, because it was so competitive against the Russians that if we hadn't, the Russians had infiltrated us and they would have put out the information that we faked it. That's my opinion. Or Soviets.
I don't know enough, but I like what Sarah's saying on this one. She doesn't sound as left field as she sounded other times today.
You know, for 50 plus years.
Never.
When was it, by the way? When did we land on the moon? When did we land on the moon? What is the date? What year? 60. It's under before the end of the decade is when Kennedy said it, right? Yeah. What year is it? 69.
Right under the wire.
So what do you say to the people that say, give me a break, guys? There's no way we landed on the moon. The bottom of the sole of the shoe is different. The boots. If we did, how come we haven't since 69? We have better technology, better everything. You mean to tell me we landed on the moon? What do you say to them?
I think
yeah, go ahead.
I don't think the moon has anything super useful to land back on it and take advantage of it. I think the goal is to go farther. The problem is so many different administrations kept cutting the money, and it actually has diminished our forward leaning into space. That's my opinion.
And we landed on Apollo 11, if I'm remembering correctly, and we sent up Apollo 13 to go to the moon, and we had all sorts of issues. So we spent a shit ton of money on Apollo 12 and 13 to not achieve a useless propaganda goal, basically.
And then you get budgets cut, Congress gets involved, and you lose funding, and that's never a good thing.
And then the guy shows up who's worth $1 trillion and says he wants to build life out there. He wants to build civilization out there, right? So who knows? Who knows? Let's go to the next one.
I think he wants to die on Mars. So.
Yeah, I think so. So by the way, if you're watching this, you agree, disagree, they're both on Connect. You can actually connect them and ask him any questions that maybe you are watching right now that we haven't covered yet. Next one, Havana Syndrome. Uh-oh. What do we have? Conspiracy? Oh, here we go. Let's have some fun with this one. Tell me why. I'll go to you first. Why is it a conspiracy?
So there's some very real experiences and very real accounts that people have, but there's not enough smoking gun evidence to confirm that it is actually intentionally tied to something, some energy weapon, some commonality, some common cause.
And I believe it's just the Moscow signal from the 1950s, and it's been kind of tweaked and elevated. I actually have friends with Havana syndrome. I had a friend hit with it just last summer. So I know plenty of people with it. I actually know someone who was my age who died, like a year and a half ago from the complications of it. So it is real. Now, the argument has been, where does it come from? I believe it comes from Russia. Our government hasn't wanted to take that step because once you do, that is Russia directly targeting and harming not just Americans, but obviously people across the CIA, the Department of Defense. But they do like the best of the best, but right before the senior leaders, which is really interesting. So they'll take a CIA case officer who's worked Russia for 15 years, and he's, maybe going to become head of the division or whatever. And then that's when they target him. So it's very...
Unfortunately, that one cut off in the middle of her talking about it. This is from the PBD podcast, Patrick Bet David. Very popular podcast, I'm sure you're aware of it. Those two people, Andrew Bustamante is the gentleman, Sarah, I forget her last name, unfortunately, both former CIA officers or worked in the intelligence community. I don't know the nuances of the titles and this, that, and the other. So correct me in the comments if you want, but they are career intelligence folks, and these are not whistleblowers. They are in good standing with the intelligence community as far as we know. So take what they say with a grain of salt. There's been some claims, some opinions online about Andrew Bustamante specifically, and whether or not he's kind of out there still pushing propaganda, pro-government propaganda. Either way, whether they're doing that intentionally or not, I think that anyone with, that type of background, you have to look at what they're saying through the lens of their biases. They're certainly they spent their life working at this institution. They're certainly going to have a probably fairly positive light about it. Most of these folks, though, these are not dummies. These aren't ignorant people. These are, you often don't get to work in a place like that unless you're very much a type A, high achieving person with a good head on your shoulders, and you're hardworking, and you're, a lot of things, right? These are high level people, achievers, high level achievers. So what I mean by that is they're often not saying the goofy stuff. They're often willing to admit to a lot of the issues with the government, with the institutions that they worked for. And while they might be operating from a place of bias, they are intelligent enough to be able to admit to legitimate criticisms of their biases, legitimate criticisms to the organizations that they've worked around and in. At the end of the day, they have an inside track and an inside perspective that most people never will. So I think what they say carries a lot of weight. It's very interesting.
Not many people know this, but in the 1990s, there was a conspiracy theorist with a public access show where he ranted about crazy crackpot theories every single day, and nobody took him seriously. But then after he died, it turned out he was right about everything. In the late 80s and throughout the 1990s, there was a man named Clay Tiffany who had a public access TV show called Dirge of the Charlatans, where he would sit for hours on end and just rant and ramble about all kinds of conspiracy theories about elite government corruption within the city. He would talk about judges laundering money through nonprofits and NYPD officers falsifying crimes to throw people in jail, and members of the NYPD acting as roving gangs and enforcers for the mob. But then something happened to Clay Tiffany. In March of 1997, he was pulled over by an NYPD officer named Nick Tartagliani, who said that he had seen Clay Tiffany's show and wanted him to stop talking about the NYPD, and that he was connected to the mob, and if he didn't shut up, he would have him taken care of. Or at least this is what Tiffany claimed the following day on his show, where he talked about the incident. And as Clay Tiffany claims, the next day after this broadcast, Nick Tartaglione showed up at his house, threw him against his police cruiser, arrested him, and brought him in on some made-up disturbing the peace charge. But Clay Tiffany was not going to be bullied, and he would not give up. So the next several years on his show, he did a full investigation of Nick Tartaglione, sending in a bunch of requests with the Freedom of Information Act to the government to get documents about him. And he dug up a ton of dirt, like multiple police brutality reports, a bunch of excessive force complaints, and unexplained departures from dozens of his previous police jobs. And in response, Clay Tiffany claims that he was attacked and brutalized by Nick Tartaglione and his cop buddies multiple times throughout those years. The first incident, he was attacked outside of his home again. The second incident, he was thrown to the pavement and beaten outside of a town meeting. And the third incident, he was beaten so badly that he was hospitalized for weeks. Tiffany ended up suing Nick Tartaglione. He didn't win, but there was an undisclosed sum settled out of court. But more importantly, he had lost any credibility that he ever possibly had because of these repeat accusations of Nick Tartaglione, and people started actively calling for his public access show to end. So in the...
Man, I'm so bummed that ended short. That is such an incredible story. I don't know all the details of it, so I'm really bummed we didn't get the whole clip there. That sucks. He was just going into the fact that the public action was being called to be canceled. I don't remember that part of the story. What I remember ultimately ends up happening, and again, the middle here is the details of the middle part of the story are missing for me. So a lot of the nuance and complexity here I may not capture, but ultimately I think what ends up happening is Tartaglione, the NYPD officer, ends up like fired in disgrace or something like that. He had, I believe he allegedly, I have to say that, I don't know the details again. I think he had attacked the guy with the public access show and like very severely, like put him in the hospital. Like he was on his almost dead. He was on his deathbed. He survived, I'm pretty sure, but Tartaglione gets like released from the force, sort of fired in disgrace. Tartaglione goes on to like I think he starts, again, allegedly, I think he starts a drug ring. And with a couple of other officers, and like his story goes way off the rails. He gets wild and basically goes full criminal, starts running like a drug ring. He has a couple of other officers working with him. Ultimately, he ends up getting busted and he goes to prison. Here's the craziest spin on the story. He was Epstein's cellmate right before he died. Right before Epstein died, committed suicide. This was the guy who was in the cell with Epstein the night before. I think when Epstein actually reportedly kills himself, he was alone in his cell. They had removed his cellmate, but this was his last cellmate, was this guy, and one of the last people to see Epstein alive. Such a wild story.
One conspiracy that fucks me up more than anything else is the Miami Mall incident. What do you mean? What do you mean that people are claiming that they saw 8 to 10 foot creatures coming out of a portal, yet we don't have a single video? What do you mean that the coordinates of the mall are the exact same as the coordinates to Antarctica, but backwards? What do you mean that there was a citywide call for all available units to dispatch to the mall? And what do you mean that this was the most amount of officers that have ever been on a scene in Miami's history just for some kids rioting with fireworks? What do you mean that an officer saw multiple people just completely frozen with their mouths wide open and blood coming out of their ears with no explanation? What do you mean that there was black helicopters circling the mall and all air traffic was cut off at that very moment? What do you mean that the police took everyone's cell phone and made them delete every video and photo that they had in there? What do you mean that there was multiple counts of seeing these massive figures coming out of portals and glitching, yet those people are nowhere to be found to talk about it again? What do you mean?
Yeah, I don't think we've talked about the Miami Mall conspiracy on the show yet, but It's super interesting to me. I don't know what the story is there. I don't know how much really compelling evidence we have for aliens, which is the popular theory, but I do think that there's enough evidence there to suggest that something strange happened that night. Definitely feels to be the case. I don't know a ton of details, but it's a wild one. It's a wild one.
I just saw a video of a guy who showed us that there's a face next to the moon. There is something up there watching us next to the moon. First of all, who the fuck is that? Who is that? Are we an ant farm on a dude's desk? Like, are we in a little maze just sitting on somebody that's much bigger than us, his desk or something? Some people say, oh, we might be an experiment from the aliens. What kind of experiment? Did they just want to see like what would happen if you just leave a species out there with no ruler? Are we in hell? Did I do something in my past life that I don't know about? I need answers. Who the fuck was that by the moon?
It's the man on the moon, man. Yeah, I mean, I don't know about this one. I would have loved to see a picture. Obviously, these ones are a lot more just fun to think about. Like, it does make you wonder, like, you know, the universe is so big and we know so little. Like, what is it? What is it? You know? I don't know. If you think you matter, like, I think it's just a lack of perspective. If you've never considered the vastness of the cosmos, like, you don't matter, this world doesn't matter, your life doesn't matter, nothing you ever do will matter, nothing any of us ever do will matter when you consider the vastness of the cosmos and just the insignificance of our existences. You know, it should lead you to consider what is everything? You know, what is everything? And if you can't wrap your head around like being so vast that they could be using Earth as an experiment or something like that, I think it's just because you lack imagination and you want to be so serious, be taken very serious. You know, yeah, I'm not saying there's any evidence for this kind of stuff, but it's an interesting thought experiment.
What if I told you, the moment he finally spoke the truth, they didn't celebrate him. They declared him insane.
Before you label or condemn me, don't treat me like a criminal, because I am innocent.
Michael Jackson didn't say it on stage, and he didn't say it in some glossy interview.
In the last few weeks, a large amount of ugly, malicious information has been released into the media about me. Please keep an open mind and let me have my day in court. I deserve a fair trial like every other American citizen.
He whispered it when the cameras weren't supposed to be rolling. Because behind the sequins, behind the moonwalk, behind the global worship, was a man under pressure.
Were you under the influence of drugs or alcohol that impaired your ability to understand what you were doing?
A man pushing against something far bigger than fame. A man who, some believe, was silenced before he could finish what he started. And here's where it gets strange. Michael Jackson didn't just irritate a few executives, he confronted them. He went to war with the machine itself. And right before he died, he was doing the one thing no other artist had ever dared attempt. He was trying to control the entire music industry from the inside out. It began with a catalog, but not just any catalog. Sony ATV, the holy vault of modern music. The Beatles, Elvis, Marvin Gaye, Bob Dylan. Songs that printed money every single minute. And in 1985, Michael Jackson bought it outright. Not a slice, not a share, all of it. One of the most influential black artists in history, quietly buying the blueprint of Western pop music, wasn't just business, it was tectonic. Even Paul McCartney warned him, not about the deal, but about the enemies it would create. But Michael didn't back down. He merged the catalog with Sony's and walked away with half of the most powerful music library on Earth. In that moment, he wasn't just the king of pop. He held the keys to the kingdom. And that's when everything changed. Because suddenly, he wasn't a superstar. He was a freak, a predator, a man who bleached his skin, hated his race, slept in chambers, clutched dolls. Stories designed to turn a legend into a circus. The media flipped, the lawsuits poured in, the narrative twisted. Because Michael Jackson stopped being profitable to the right people. He stopped being controllable, and he started talking. There's one speech, rare, barely seen, where he stands before a crowd, not singing, but warning. He says the history books lie. The media is manipulated. The industry is a conspiracy.
Yeah, I'll say I'm a big fan of Michael Jackson. I always have been, since before I can remember. My mom used to tell stories of me like dancing to him as a little kid. I missed his heyday. I wasn't old enough to really appreciate it. I was alive, but I was 5 years old when he started to kind of tone down things. But, in the 80s, this guy there's no one, I don't think there's anyone has ever been as famous or will be as famous as Michael Jackson was. I don't care. This generation, people think Taylor Swift obviously incredibly successful. I'm not throwing shade, but Taylor Swift, Beyonce, none of today's stars compare to Mike. This is the man. End of discussion. There's no one who comes close. There's a statue. I think they built a statue, a giant statue. I can't remember how big it was, 50 feet, 100 feet, some giant bronze statue. I think it was bronze. I can't remember what material it was made out of. And they put it on boats and dragged it in the middle of the bay and somewhere, I can't remember where it was, overseas in Europe or something. And just to celebrate him coming to do a tour in their country. He shows up in Russia one day, at an airport. The whole airport shut down. The whole airport shut down because people just found out that he was there and rushed to the airport to go see him. He wanted to do a music video. I think it was for They Don't Really Care About Us in one of the favelas of Brazil. I could be wrong with the song, but he definitely did the music video in Brazil. Or might have been Brazil, might have been Colombia. I think it might have been Colombia. During the time of the cartels and that kind of stuff. And one of the most dangerous favelas. And I think the favelas are Brazil. But a really dangerous neighborhood of Colombia. And his agents and stuff like that were telling him, you can't do that, man. This is way too dangerous. I guess he put it out in the news, in the media, was like, hey, I want to do this. The cartel reached out and said, listen, Mike will be safer here than anywhere on the planet. We guarantee his safety. And no one will touch him, on our word. And he went and did the music video there. That's how big this guy is, right? The cartel shuts down the city for you. The cartel, because you want to shoot a music video, guarantees your safety. Come on, man. There's no one like this guy. And the reason I say that is because when you live a life like that, I imagine you're going to be a little weird. He's definitely weird. There's no doubt about it. Doesn't mean everything that was said about him in the news was real. I certainly don't believe a lot of it. And as more comes out about Hollywood and the music business and the record companies and how these people operate, there's a very dark element to that business, and he went up against it. He did. That speech that was talked about in this clip, he's talking about Tommy Mottola, who I think was the CEO or something of Sony Records or something like that. And he's talking about how evil these guys are. Prince did the same thing. The reason why Prince became known as the artist formerly known as Prince was because they owned his name. And these contracts that they sign are just ridiculous, man. Absolutely ridiculous. And sure, they make a lot of money, but they're basically, my understanding is it's very unfair, and the cut that these people get for doing little to no work, really, is significant, and the control that they have. And the ownership, that's the thing, they have the ownership of it. And that's the real piece of it, is these artists don't really even own their own work. And that's, I think, the most unfortunate part of it. And that's what Michael started getting into. And that's what started really getting him in trouble. And if you look at the timeline of things, he says some things about, let's say, they were anti-Semitic technically. He used some slurs in one of his songs, and he wrote a song about called "Free Palestine." So he was going up against Zionists, and there's an element of that. Let's be real. It's anti-Semitic to say the Jews control Hollywood. That's not what I'm saying. When 90% of every record executive is Jewish, well, there's obviously a community. And sure, there's historical reasons for this, understood. But, there is a dark element, potentially, to some of the people operating in that industry. And it seems to mimic some of the behavior that you see from, what we'll call Zionists, the darker breed of Zionist, who is willing to do some dark stuff in order to make their goals happen. And let's not be real here, or let's not beat around the bush. Like, even putting away the PC terms, there is a long, long, long history of people of Jewish heritage taking advantage of Black people in the entertainment industry. A long history of it, a very long history of it. That's a fact. Does it mean every Jewish person in the regular is doing this? No, of course not, right? You have to be able to talk about these things with some subtlety and some nuance. But the thing that really bugs me about it is anytime you levy a criticism at certain people, all of a sudden you're labeled with certain terms, right? So there is a history there. It goes back to what's her name, Billy something, I forget, the Black woman. Which was 100 years ago. I mean, this has been going on for a long time. Eazy-E. I mean, all example after example after example after example after example. So how many examples do you really need before you go, there's a pattern here. There's a pattern. I'm seeing something that seems to happen over and over and over again. Maybe it's a problem that we should look at. And I think that is definitely the case here. And, it seems to be that the powers that be in the record industry and the entertainment industry unite, sort of circle the wagons to protect their own power, and will attack people like Michael Jackson when they feel under threat. That seems to be the case to me. That's my philosophy, outlook, perspective on this whole thing. And when you see similar behavior, manipulation, propaganda, narrative control happening out of actual Zionists who are the people actually trying to, make things happen in the Middle East, and you can see similar patterns. At some point you got to go, hey, there's some similarities here. What's going on? What's the problem? Maybe we need to look into this. Maybe we need to think about it a little bit more deeply. That's my opinion on it. I know a lot of people are probably going to find that offensive, but it is what it is. I'm a big Michael Jackson fan. I think all the stuff that he was accused of is BS. I don't know that any of it is credible whatsoever. That hasn't always been the case. Honestly, for a long time, I thought it could have been possible. He's definitely a weirdo, but I think what makes more sense to me is, yes, he's a weirdo because of the way in which he lived his life. And he's been famous since he was a little kid, since before he was even a legal adult. He's been massively famous. And that's gonna, screw you up a little bit. Look at Britney Spears. Look at a lot of these people who have been massively famous for a long time. It just messes with your head. So I think that's what accounts for a lot of the weirdness. And then I think all the other stuff is more just BS propaganda put out there by the people in power who were under threat. they took him down. I think it has happened to a lot of celebrities. I don't think he's the only one, unfortunately. I think something similar might have happened to Prince. I think something similar happened to Kanye. Still, that battle is still going on. I think something similar has happened to a lot of different celebrities over the years, unfortunately. My opinion on it at this point is pretty solidified. I'm not going to change that opinion until I see real evidence to the contrary. Because to me, it's about pattern recognition. And when you see the same pattern over, the same MO, the same playbook, the same strategies over and over and over again, and always the same characters at play, you go, okay, I'm starting to get it. I think I'm starting to get it, put the pieces together. And to me, the picture's pretty clear at this point. And so that's my thoughts on it. I'm going to stop there before I get myself in too much trouble. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed it. Please like, subscribe, comment down below. What do you think about Michael? What are your thoughts on that whole situation and the bigger picture around everything we just talked about with the entertainment industry? I'm reluctant to talk about it because it's a very controversial topic, unfortunately, but it is an important one, and I think it's probably the most important conversation we need to have over the next decade. So if you have some interesting thoughts, feelings, opinions you want to share, drop them in the comments down below. I'd love to engage in a conversation. Much appreciated. Hope you enjoyed it. We'll be back next time with another one. Thanks.